The federal government has finally made a decision on Huawei. The Chinese telecom giant is being banned from supplying Canada's telecommunications system. It was a decision 3 years in the making, and until today, Canada was the only Five Eyes ally not to announce some sort of ban. François-Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. He's in the foyer of the House of Commons. Hi, Minister. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Back in 2018, I remember listening to the chief of Canada's cyber spy agency who said there wasn't a need to ban Huawei because existing safeguards, there were existing safeguards in Canada that prevented it from being a security threat. What exactly, and can you be specific, changed?
Well, what we've announced today is that we intend to exclude Huawei and ZTE from our 5G networks. And that is the result of consultation with our intelligence agencies in Canada, consultation with our allies. You said it. Many of our allies have already, all of our allies, basically, at least in the Five Eyes, have taken similar decision. And this is really about protecting one of the most critical infrastructure in Canada, not only now, but as you've seen, there will be enabling legislation that will allow us to add any other company that we would deem eventually to pose a threat to our national security or the integrity of this critical infrastructure.
Is it your position that Huawei poses a threat to our national security?
Well, when we started that process, and you said it, Velshi started some time ago, we made sure this was not a race. We made sure at every step of the way that we would be consulting with the security agencies. We would consult with allies, which is very important as well. And we took the analysis they provided us, which informed our decision to exclude them or intend to exclude them from our 5G networks. And I think this is about Canada. This is about our national security. This is about our critical infrastructure. So the decision today is very much, I think, welcomed by Canadians, because not only we're going to protect for now, but also for generations to come, one of the infrastructure that will be critical in the Internet of Things.
Respectfully, Minister, that doesn't answer the question about whether or not it is the position of your government that Huawei poses a threat to national security in this country.
Well, what we're announcing today, Velshi, is our intention to exclude them from our 5G network. So that is the conclusion we have reached, and that's what we're announcing today. And this is informed, as you would expect, from the findings of our national security agencies in consultation with our allies around the world.
So if it has been determined that that company does pose a risk, does that mean that they have to remove themselves from all telecom infrastructure in this country?
Well, what we're saying to the telecom industry, and you'll see in the statement, it's very specific. There's dates at which time they will have to stop procuring certain equipment or services. Some equipments will have to be removed. The good news for Canadians, I would think, to reassure everyone, is that the vast majority of the 5G network in Canada does not include equipment or services from Huawei or ZTE. So this is a very clear message to the telecom company that I'm sending tonight. That will provide stability, predictability to them, is that we intend to exclude them from our 5G network.
So I just want to be clear, because I'm not an expert on the telecom industry, but I do know that there is infrastructure that exists, and I think you're saying that it's not a huge amount, but that there is infrastructure that does exist. So I'm not talking about 5G, I'm talking about 4G and 3G and stuff that's already in this country. Are you saying it will be incumbent, according to your statement, like is it that telecom companies have to get rid of all of it or just some of it as specified? Like, what is it?
Yeah, as you will see in the statement, Velshi, what we're saying is that there's a timeline for them to stop procuring. There's a timeline for them to remove any services or equipment from the 5G network. And there's a timeline for them to remove any equipment also from the 4G network. Because to your point, indeed, you're building from the 4G to the 5G network. But I think our intent is very clear. We intend to exclude them from our 4G and 5G network, and that's exactly what our statement is saying today.
You mentioned that your government didn't want to rush this decision. I know you're aware of the number of times the opposition has asked you about when this decision will come down. I think back to the conclusion of the election in the last year when the Prime Minister said a decision would be announced within weeks. Did you delay announcing this decision because of the detainment of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor?
Well, we conducted a very thorough process, and I'm very much aware of the questions that were asked because I had to answer to them. But we wanted to have a very rigorous process. I think Canadians understand this has never been about a race. When you're talking about national security, what people care is for us to make the right decision. So that's why we took the time needed to do that review, consult with allies. We completed that process. That's why tonight we can announce our intention. This was very thorough, and I think that's what Canadians would expect from us. This is about their safety and security. And when you deal with national security, you have to take the time to do things properly. Respectfully,
Minister, I think what you're saying to Canadians is respect us. The process was a thorough one. There are no details. There's a lot of opacity around what that process involved. We just kept hearing the same thing from your government. It's happening. It's happening. We're considering national security. What did Canada have to consider? What took Canada so much longer to consider than its allies, which, as you've already admitted, made the determination to ban Huawei months, if not years, before your government did?
But like I said to you, Velshi, this has never been a race when you're dealing with issues of national security. And I would say, honestly, Velshi, if you look at what this infrastructure will mean to people for generations to come, you're talking about 5G, you're talking about the Internet of Things, you're talking about autonomous vehicles. This will have an impact on our daily lives. I think people care that we take the right decision. The timing of it, I would say we did a thorough process. Obviously, when it's issues of national security, you will understand that I cannot go into details, but what I can say to Canadians is that our security agency did the work. Their conclusion informed our decision. That's why today we're providing clarity to Canadians and to the market that we will exclude these two companies from our 5G networks.
Again, with due respect, Minister, the company that you're talking about, when their CFO was detained, two of our citizens were detained by China. The links, the criticism of this company as being somehow influenced by the state have been present for years, and then we saw the manifestation of that in probably one of the worst ways possible, right, with the detainment of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. I know that this wasn't a rush, but in the meantime, look what happened. Like, how hard of a determination was it for your government to make that this company could be a threat to national security?
Well, I would say to you, Velshi, when you're looking at this issue, this is about Canada. This is about our national security. This is about one of our most critical infrastructure. This is what guided us in this process. And I'm very well aware of what you mentioned, because at the time I was Foreign Affairs Minister, so I'm very aware of the issues that you're referring to. But I would say in a decision which would have consequences for decades to come, the frame around that is what's in the best interest of Canada, protecting our national security and ensuring the integrity of one of the most critical infrastructure, which is our telecommunication infrastructure across the country. That's the frame.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure.
François-Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Industry. Let's get some reaction now from the company itself. Alykhan Velshi is Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Huawei, based in Canada. He's with us from Toronto. Mr. Velshi, good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Were you expecting this decision?
I mean, we've been expecting this for 3 years. It's just, this delay has gone on for so and so long, but I don't think anyone is surprised that the government has made this decision. I think we're disappointed by the outcome. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of, what the government announced is really the intent to introduce legislation, the intent to make certain changes. But right now, there's no prohibitions on the book on selling Huawei equipment, and that will remain the case. It was the case yesterday, it was the case today, it'll be the case tomorrow as well.
So help me understand that a little bit more. As I was saying to the minister, I'm not like an expert on telecom. All I know is that there is Huawei equipment that exists in networks outside of what would be 5G. He seemed to indicate that there was a statement that came out today that companies would have to not purchase future equipment and then even address some of the current equipment. What's your understanding of the stuff that you already have in this country?
Sure. So Huawei's been selling equipment in this country, in Canada, since 2008. So for about 14 years. Since the government announced its 5G review back in 2018, we've sold another $700 million worth of equipment. And our position to the government has always been that there is no way to introduce any sort of prohibition on Huawei without proceeding with legislation. That's sort of what they've done. I think we'll await to see the details of the legislation. But right now, we haven't seen any information from the government that addresses any of the following 2 points. One, what sort of national security threat they think Huawei poses, what evidence they have. But second, what they're going to do about, the extensive amount of Huawei equipment that is already in the network between now and when they expect it to be removed. There needs to be software upgrades. There needs to be ongoing maintenance. Literally, as we are speaking right now, we're in talks with technical officials in the government about delivering and deploying the latest version of our software on the Huawei equipment that's already in the network, more than 10,000 sites across the country. And I find it hard to believe the government is going to want to suspend those discussions.
Sorry, I just want to get this straight. You're in talks with the federal government?
Yes, because in the federal government, under the security review program, we anything that we want to sell under the SRP has to go through this process. And as you know, there's an extensive amount of Huawei equipment that's already in Canada's telecommunications network. There needs to be software updates and upgrades to that. Generally, this happens on an annual basis. And the process for bringing in these upgrades is happening right now as we are speaking.
And have you been on the receiving end of any communication that will no longer be the case?
No, we haven't received any communication to that effect, and I would find it hard to believe that the federal government or Canada's telecommunications operators would want Huawei to stop servicing existing equipment in the network. I think that would be a pretty reckless and irresponsible decision on the part of the government. Our position is we're going to continue supporting Huawei equipment in the network, and that will require a level of ongoing cooperation at the technical level between Huawei and the federal government, not just in the days and weeks ahead, but frankly in the years ahead for as long as this equipment is part of Canada's telecommunications network.
If Huawei can't be a part of Canada's 5G network, is there a place for the company from your perspective in this country?
Absolutely. So right now we have around 1,500 employees. Most of those work in research and development, which is not affected by this announcement. We spend about $300 million each year on R&D, not affected by this announcement. We spend about 5% of that and collaborations with universities, not affected by this announcement. We sell consumer devices like handsets, cell phones, smartwatches, not affected by this announcement. And so the reality is Huawei will form part of Canada's telecommunications sector for the foreseeable future. And let me make one other point. I know I'm droning on a bit, but when the government announced their 5G review in 2018, we didn't just suspend operations. We diversified our business by expanding R&D, by expanding our consumer business, because we anticipated that there might be US pressure that might lead to this sort of announcement on 5G. So as a result, we grew our business in other areas.
I got to ask you, and I know you've been on the program before insisting, and the company itself has insisted, look, the accusation is you're a national security threat because you're so intricately tied to the state, to the Chinese government. I know that's something that you said is not the case. But we now have all of the Five Eyes allies saying the opposite. Are you really able to come on and tell Canadians the governments of all of those countries are wrong? We don't pose a national security threat. We aren't too tied to the Chinese state government?
Look, Huawei operates in 180 countries around the world, including most of the G7, including most of Canada's NATO allies. There's sort of a ban on Huawei in the United States, in Australia, in the UK. The situation in New Zealand is more unclear than I think you sometimes see reported in the media. But the reality is, in most countries around the world, in most telecommunications companies that operate in the world, there's, including for most of Canada's allies, there's Huawei equipment. At the end of the day, though, this is a political decision. We're disappointed by the decision, but it won't change the fact that Huawei will continue to form a part of Canada's telecommunications network certainly in the years to come.
And I take that point, and I'm sure you understand why I have to challenge you on the idea that we're doing a lot of stuff. So, and you know what? That's a good question for the government too. You're allowed in all these other areas, but ultimately, when it comes to the security of a 5G network, which governments have said is of utmost importance to the national security. I think is that your cat? Sorry, I'll acknowledge it for the viewers. Sorry about that. Ultimately, that is of utmost importance to the security of the country for which they are governing. They have, like I said, they have made the determination that your country does constitute. Your company does constitute a threat. Doesn't that make your job more difficult? Isn't it harder to get on here and say, we're not? I mean, if it were just Canada or just the US, but it's not. It really isn't. It's the UK, as you said, it's Australia. To a certain degree, it's New Zealand.
Look, it's no secret this has been a time of real tension between Canada and China. our position is that it's unfair to blame nationals from those countries, companies from those countries for diplomatic disputes with those governments. I think that's, you just can't stereotype companies and people from those countries when you have disputes with the government. But at the end of the day, I think that it's for the government to provide evidence that Huawei is a national security threat, as they claim. They have not done so. They did not do so today, despite being asked a number of times, including by yourself. And that's a question that they will answer. What I can say on behalf of Huawei Canada is that the only laws that apply to Huawei Canada are the laws of Canada. And every single person who works at Huawei Canada, from our president, Tom, to our chief cybersecurity officer, Darren, to me, to the engineer who's working on software upgrades for our customers, we all have to follow Canadian laws and Canadian laws alone. And we'll continue to do that regardless of today's announcement, which, to be honest, is kind of a damn squib, right? For 3 years, they spent 3 years preparing this announcement, and all they announced is the intent to introduce legislation that might remove Huawei gear at some point in the future.
I mean, that would prevent Huawei from entering 5G. That's not that much of I'm not sure the phrase you used, but not that tiny.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been selling equipment since 2018, since they launched their 5G review. There's been no prohibition on Huawei selling equipment, and that forms part of Canada's 5G network right now. We're providing software upgrades to our customers, which we're doing right now. That's our latest version of our software. That's not, some old version using pre-2016 technology. That's the latest stuff, and that's what we're bringing into Canada. That's what we're selling into Canada with the full knowledge and cooperation of the government of Canada. And I don't think that's going to change in the days or weeks ahead, despite the sort of the spin that you might get from the headlines that the government is seeking.
I guess we'll have to find out. Thanks, Alykhan. I appreciate it. Alykhan Velshi is Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Huawei, based here in Canada. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.